The extremes of animal performance provide insight into the evolution of form and function. In birds, remarkable flight behaviors have been shaped by both natural selection and sexual selection, such as in hummingbird mating displays. The neotropical bird mannequins are renowned for their display behaviors. Males of most species attract females with a diverse repertoire of physical displays. Many of these displays involve novel mechanisms of sound production. In a few species, we know fairly precisely what males actually do during these displays. For example, in the genus Mannequin, males slap their wings together above their back to create a popcorn-like sound. And in clubwing mannequins, males produce an insect-like buzz by rubbing wing feathers together. Studies of these species have revealed the functional significance of morphological oddities and remarkable physiological capabilities. However, for most mannequin species, we have a relatively basic understanding of what males actually do during their displays because they occur so rapidly. And even for the best studied species, we know little of how or even if young birds learn their displays and what females find attractive. That is definitely true for the star of this show, the white-ruffed manakin, a relatively well-studied species living in Central America. This bird lives in wet montane forests, and they perform their displays on fallen mossy logs in the understory. They perform several display elements remarkably silently in the understory, but the culmination of their display involves a flight from their log to above the canopy, circling flights and calls well above the treetops, and then a high-speed dive to the log where they do a jump about face accompanied by 3 sounds. Prum described these as a combination of vocal and mechanical sounds, but we don't have any more detail about what happens during these final elements and how the sounds are produced. You can see from this clip that the human eye and regular videography are inadequate for fully describing what happens during the flap chihuahua. So our objectives were to use high-speed videography to understand first what exactly white-ruffed mannequins do during their displays. 2, quantify aspects of the physical and acoustic elements. 3, determine how each of the main sound elements are produced. We want to determine how young males learn and ultimately relate that to female choice. So today I have only time to focus on the first couple of parts, but I'll give you some teasers regarding the rest. In 2019, we recorded 9 males of different ages displaying at 4 different logs, alone or in the presence of other males or females. Data presented here are based on just over half of those recordings. We can add a lot more to the ethogram of this behavior now. And so throughout this talk, I'll refer to these 2 drawings that depict movements. On the left, the view from the log from the side, and on the right, the view sort of looking down the barrel of a male display log. We were able to record the final portions of the dive, which presumably starts above the canopy. We captured the final meter or 2 above the log when birds are hurtling down towards the ground at very high speed, at times over 35 meters per second. They break their dive by throwing open their wings, on average only about 2.4 meters above the log, and they instantly go into what we're calling the Spock move. Their wings are arched over their back and a space opens between the primaries, and that space ripples across the primaries in sort of 2 cycles. The male immediately goes into braking mode by turning his body into a parachute with the wings and tail fully extended and his body shifting to a horizontal plane. And he decelerates strongly during this period. As far as the acoustic elements, the flap is the first one of the 3, and it occurs in conjunction with the Spock. I'm going to play it for you now at full speed first, and then in the next, slowed down. You'll see this now synchronized with the audio in a high-speed video clip. This is a sideways view of the dive. Because even at that speed, the details of what happens are hard to see. Here is a frame-by-frame depiction of that same flap. After the parachute, the bird is heading more or less horizontally, just above the log. And he goes into the twist. During the twist, his body goes from a normal head-first horizontal flight to an upside-down vertical posture. Then he moves backwards through the air and downward to land. At the peak of the arc, he briefly tucks his wings and swivels rapidly. If the female is on the log, he does this right over top of her. One of the cool things we found out is that males seem to be handed in the sense that individuals always swivel in a consistent direction, but different individuals swivel either over their left or right shoulders. During this twist, the males make the second sound, the chi, and this actually consists of 3 distinct elements: an initial series of 7 peaks of high amplitude, a central loud bit, and then this mini flap at the end. Here's the sound of that at full speed and slowed down. You can definitely hear that after flap in the slowed down one. The chi is made during the twist, as you can see in that synchronized video. And there's a female on the log there. And actually in that last video, you saw the final move, which we're calling the barami. This is a term borrowed from gymnastics for an aerial cartwheel. It also involves a swivel at the apex, but it occurs at a lower height relative to the log and also occurs right over the female if she's present. The direction of that swivel is always the opposite as the one during the twist. During the barami, the third of the 3 acoustic elements occurs, the wah. The middle of this wah has a series of extremely evenly spaced big peaks. And here's what that sounds like at full speed and slowed down. And here it is synced with video. There's a lot in these videos that I would like to share, but don't have time for, but here are just a few tidbits. First, there's incredible spatial repeatability in the displays. Here's an example of the same male doing different dives passing through the exact same airspace and initiating display elements in the same locations. The males can also land in exactly the same location on the log if they want to. But if a female is present, they have great flexibility to modulate their displays in response to her location on the log. Here's another example of that, looking at the side of a log and the location of the peak twist. This is where males typically do that at this log, but here's an example with the female way over to the right and a female way over to the left. Males doing that twist in different locations. Males are also upping their performance when females show up. They do all the elements faster. In this example, I'm showing the lag between acoustic elements when a female is present versus when a female is not present. Finally, we've started determining the ways these sounds are produced. We took 17 of the cleanest audio files for the flap and removed the individual variation by averaging the acoustic signal. And what you can see here is this initial dramatic peak consistent with an unsteady aerodynamic force that occurs at the point the males open the wing. And then you can also see this second negative pressure wave bracketed by 2 series of irregular peaks. And using that synced video, we're pretty sure this occurs due to the movement of the air through the primaries during that Spock move. The chi has been the hardest element to figure out so far. However, it seems likely that these 3 elements are produced in different ways. One of the reasons we think this is this middle element is likely vocal. The fundamental frequency of that is 7,000 hertz, which leads to a predicted trachea length of 2.53, which is really similar to similarly sized zebra finches. But then this little after flap is similar to that wing sound in the first element. And one possibility is that some part of that is driven by this weird alula shape in the species. Finally, the wah, it only occurs in the context of a brahmi. When males skip that last part, they also don't have any the corresponding acoustic element. We're pretty sure this is vocal. We can see the bird's mouth open during these moves, and the peak signal happens at the peak of when the male is over the female. However, the fundamental frequency of this sound is far lower than the chi, and the structure of that sound is really different. And we think it's made by a vocal mechanism called vocal fry, like wah, that kind of sound. So it seems like Prum was right. It does appear these sounds are produced by a combination of vocal and mechanical mechanisms, but we have more work to do to understand exactly how the chi element is generated. So My take home is that white ruff mannequins are even cooler than we thought. They're doing really complex movements, making mechanical sounds at the same time in a structurally complex 3D space. Their speeds are exceptional, rivaling hummingbird sort of records. We've discovered a new mechanism of sound production for this family. And our current work is focusing on evaluating whether the forces in the flap explain a previous finding of sort of weird high bone solidness in some of the wing bones in this species. So I'd like to thank a few people, especially Franz Galler and Natasha Bergwein, funding agencies, and thank you for listening.